Hey guys, how's it going? Gamer Addict here. Welcome to the video. This is a bit of a different one. I'm making this video just to go through the PC builds and budget market. Basically 4 years ago I started building PCs, and it's the actual reason for this channel. I mean, is it still possible to build a budget gaming PC for a cheap price? I don't know anymore. Basically, the reason for this video is to have a look at if it's possible. So in the next few months I'll be doing PC builds, and what can you actually get out of a budget gaming rig. Basically, I started 4 years ago. This is one of my first builds. A Core i5 2500K, 4 core, 8 threads. Yeah, and this is basically the setup that I put together for it. It was a very cheap build. Cost me 2,000 Rand for the motherboard, RAM, and CPU. And then yeah, I sold it for 5,500, and this has been from my first gaming PC all the way up until where I am now. So we're gonna go through, have a look at it, have a look at some of the specs, and then in future videos I'll be doing a similar type of thing. Building gaming PCs and seeing where it goes. Obviously the market at the moment is a bit haywire, but yeah, we're gonna try it. This is what I've always enjoyed doing, so we're gonna continue with it. Okay, so there's all the specs for this setup. It was a fairly cheap build. I mean, I built it for about 4,000, sold it for about, well, 4.5 I think I built it for. Sold it for 5.5, so it was a pretty decent build. I did change out a few of the components. The graphics card in there was the one that I was actually using at the time. It was a mining graphics card that I picked up for next to nothing. I think this one itself, well, that one in the picture is a RX 580, the 4 gig version, and I picked it up from a miner for like 1,500 Rand. So a very good deal on the graphics card. When I sold this system, I actually took out the graphics card and I replaced it with one of also a 4 gig variant. Very good card, it was cheap. I actually bought this card new, but it was expensive. I think I paid 2.5 for it, and I had it for a few years before I completed this build. So yeah, it had 8 gigs. 8 gigs. I mean, running on an Intel system, it was pretty decent. Very good overclock. I mean, this thing could overclock to 5 gigahertz fairly easily, even on a standard basic cooler. So very nice little build. I mean, you can still nowadays get a motherboard, a CPU with RAM, and I mean, you can put together a build like this for yourself. There was a bit of a problem due to the fact that the Core i5 2500K 4 core 4 thread, a little bit outdated, so starting to run some games it was running at 100% utilization. But I mean, overall a pretty decent system. I don't know what they would. I don't know if they would live up to the games that are coming out nowadays, but I mean, it's a good place to start. Core i5 6th gen, so we've gone from a 2nd gen to a 6th gen. 8 gigs RAM, RX 580 4 gig. This is where I actually sold the RX 580 with it. Budget gaming PC. Fairly basic system. I managed to pick up that for pretty cheap, but obviously the downfall on this thing is the 4 core 4 threads. Some 4 core 8 threads are still very capable CPUs, but it starts becoming a limiting factor. And you just start playing something like Warzone or games that need a little bit more CPU power. It becomes a bit of a problem, and I found that at the moment 6 cores 6 threads kind of the place to be when it comes to the higher end games. I mean, but this system I built for basically what I sold the other system for, 5.5, and then I sold it for 7.5. So pretty decent build. Aftermarket cooler, not a bad cooler. It's decent, and RGB. People seem to like the RGB factor of these things. Very simple case. I mean, the cases I was picking up were like 500 Rand a case. So pretty basic, pretty decent. Always put an SSD in. I mean, it helps. It's not much of an overclocking board. but overall a solid system. Obviously the limiting factors are the 8 gigs RAM. Nowadays you'd have to up it to about a 16 gig RAM. So we'll be looking at that in future. And then yeah, all the specs. Next system was one of my first Ryzen systems that I built. This was a Ryzen 5 1600 AF. Yeah, pretty decent system. 3.6 gigahertz boost, a fairly basic board. The Cleave Bolt, which is 8 gig, 3200 megahertz DDR4 RAM. I actually got it as a kit, an upgrade kit from EveTech. So I was busy upgrading my stuff, and my first Ryzen CPU I got was a 1600 AF. Oh, they were, as soon as the 2600s came out, the prices dropped to next to nothing. But I mean, same situation. From the money that I made building this thing, I just put it straight back into continuing to build the next one. This one itself came with a GeForce GTX 1060 Ti. At the time, you could pick them up for a very, very good price. Nowadays, it's a different story. Fairly simple solid-state drive. I mean, these are the type of things that is fairly upgradable. So you take it as it comes. Although they are budget boards and budget systems, I mean, upgrading the RAM and upgrading more storage and putting a faster GPU in that would actually suit these things just fine. They are becoming dated, but I mean, in terms of 6-core 12-threaded CPU, I mean, fairly decent. Cool. The case itself was like $500. So very budget and very simple to build, actually. So all in all, a fairly decent system. And basically over time I've just bought, built and put back into other systems. Fairly basic I/O, not much air intake on the top of these things, but I mean the case looked very nice. I never understood some of these things, why they would. So it's got space for 2 fans, but the power supply has to go there, so where do you put the 2 fans? It's not like you can turn this thing around, because as soon as you turn it around, guess what, the cables are going to be on this side. So not entirely sure, but overall the case looked very, very nice. I mean, it was a very, very nice looking case. Glass front panels, a glass side panel. And yeah, that sold for 8,999 Rand. Is it worth it? Yeah, I would say so. It's always worth what someone's willing to pay for it. I mean, that's about as much as you can do with, I mean, full RGB fans in it. This Core i5 4th gen, 8 gigs RAM, GTX 1063 gig. At the time, you could pick these things up for pretty cheap. I mean, the Core i5 4460. If you bought it in a kit, in a combo, you can buy it. You could at the time. You could buy it on the second-hand market as a combo. So you'd buy the RAM and the CPU and the motherboard together. It works out to be a very basic budget build. I mean, this one sold for 6,499 Rand, so pretty decent price. Obviously, budget cheap out on the power supply to try and keep the price as low as possible. Upgrading options becomes a bit limiting, but this type of system, you either keep the GPU, put a cheaper one in, and then flog the system as it is, and then continue. But I mean, decent RGB, obviously, to minimize costs, keep less fans on it. The case itself came with fans and front panel and side panel, which is one of those weird things as to where the air gets into that front panel. But anyway, yeah. So these are all, I mean, basic budget boards, fairly okay-ish I/O. Cases are still, if you're looking at a budget case, $500 is like what I was paying for these things. They're more expensive now. I think it's a lot more expensive to bring them into the country. 1063 gig. 1063 gig is a bit of a problem at the moment. The games don't like it. If you're running 1080p, 4 gigs is the way to go. And yeah. Then at that stage of building that system, I was running on a GTX 1070, and this was GTX 1070s were going for 4,500, and this is for the 1 edition. Very nice graphics card, GTX. Man, these things were stunning. I've managed to keep to the EVGA cards. The quality on them was absolutely amazing. Absolutely amazing. Yeah, after that, so basically I sold that one obviously for 4,500. The next one that I bought was a GTX 1080 for the 1 gaming. Also a very nice card. The difference between the two was the 1070 only lit up white, so it only had white LEDs on it, whereas the 1080 for the 1 had RGB, so very nice card. This was my original setup, so basically I bought a EVGA combo, not an EVGA, an EVTech combo set, motherboard, CPU, RAM, and basically this was my setup. I mean, at the time, PC cases were very expensive, are still very expensive, and I felt I didn't need one. I mean, this thing even running a radiator in the background with some industrial fans on it, so this thing was a bit of a monster. But yeah, very nice card. Well, I guess I overclocked it a little bit much, but beautiful, beautiful card. Stunning, stunning, stunning card. Yeah, for the 1. With the upgrade kits that you get from EVTech, you often get pretty much a budget basic cooler. But once I'd gotten to a point where I could upgrade it, I did. So yeah, I flogged this for 1.3. I mean, a decent price to get rid of it. Even this one. This is a 1080 back in the day. Is this thing dated? Probably not. It probably is dated somewhere. But I mean, this was selling for 6,500. It's crazy to think now these things are going for like 10,000 rand. And then after that one, basically I sold the 1080 for this. I don't actually have proper pictures of it. These are ones that I pulled off the net. The 1080 Ti. So this was the upgrade version. Oh, there we go. There's a picture of it. I mean, such a stunning card, this. So, good card. I eventually sold it for 7,500. I mean, that was the price at the time. Keep it for till now and you can sell it for 12,000. Was it worth it? At the time, for sure. I mean, the weirdest thing is I think I kept it for about a year, and I bought it for 7,500, so I lost nothing on the card. And then we started switching it up a little bit. First, I built a system without a graphics card to try and see if we could do a streaming system. It didn't really sell. So then I went back to building normal systems. So this one is a Ryzen 3600 budget gaming PC. Yeah, I went for 10,800. 16 gigs RAM, and it's got the Kingston HyperX. You get them for budget case, 500 bucks case, budget power supply. I think it was a 600 rand power supply. And slowly but surely you start building your system as you go. That's better. Yeah. GTX 1060 3 gig, so I could pick up these things pretty cheap. At one stage I was picking them up for I think 1.5. Nowadays they're going for like 3 grand. But again, the 3 gig is a bit of an issue when it comes to these things. Basic RAID Mac power supply. I mean, fairly decent cable management, but there wasn't many cables in it, so I mean, and a budget fan. I think these are the Corsair fans that were installed on these things. HyperX, no RGB. I mean, keep it down to a budget. These things run fairly well. This being a Ryzen 5 3600. It's a pretty, obviously not the experience, but it's a pretty decent GPU. Overclockable, I mean it can handle itself. The motherboard is basic, as basic as you get it. I/O, rear I/O, and yeah, that's all the components for this thing. This was a bit of a different one, and it actually did fairly well. So this is a budget build, another budget build, gaming budget build. This was with the Ryzen 3 3200G, 16 gigs RAM. So we were looking at using the built-in graphics instead of actually getting a graphics card, because this is in amongst the pandemic. So yeah, not too bad. 4-core, 4-thread, fairly decent. And what I did was, actually at the time I wanted to upgrade my RAM. So what I did was I bought new RAM for myself and then sold the RAM that I had inside the kit. Works out. So this I mean had pretty decent 16 gigs Vengeance RGB Pros in it. I mean pretty decent build. Performance wise, without a graphics card, okay. AAA titles, it becomes a bit of a problem. But I definitely do it again, but maybe go for something higher end than this type of thing. The problem is AAA titles. AAA titles wipe out any iGPUs. You need discrete graphics for those things. And you can. I mean, this thing sold for 7,250 rand, unusual price to sell it for. But I think I built it for about 5,000 or 6,000. I think it was 6,000 that this worked out to. So the idea of this video is we're going to be looking at future upgrades and future builds. So I'm looking to do one build a month. I'm looking to do one build a month, and I'll be starting with a few things that I've got lying around. So I need to do a new media PC for my house. I need to do I've got a server PC that I'm busy up for streaming, so we'll be looking at that as well. And yeah, it should be quite interesting. So basically I just want to make this video to see how it goes. Let's see how well it does. And then it was more to remember where I've been and what I've been through. I mean, all the different pieces and odds and ends that I've bought and put together. If it's profitable buying and selling and putting together things from the South African market. So yeah, thank you very much for watching. Have a good one. Oh, and this is my current build at the moment. Obviously, there's still improvements to be made. I think next on mine, but that'll also come out at a much later video. I'm running a 3800X, Ryzen 7 3800X. The next one is the 3500X. So yeah, it should be quite interesting. Obviously, I'm already on RTX. So yeah, alright, keep well, and then we'll catch you guys in the next video.